Jai Gurudev. We'll start now. We'll have Manana for 30 minutes, and after that, we'll have the Gita chanting. One of you had asked for something. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. I think today we covered quite a few shlokas of chapter 10. I think Vainateya has so many glories under his so some more stories about Vainateya today, and then Pavana Pavatamas. I think this was done yesterday itself. And then Sarganam Adirantascha. This is nice. It is like of the creation, I'm the beginning, the end, and the middle. Sustain the whole thing. And Adhyatma Vidya Vidyanam. Of the knowledge, I am the knowledge of the self. And Vada Pravadatamaham. I'm the Samvada or the Vada of this different kinds of discussions. Then Aksharanam Akarosmi Dvandvas Tamasikasya cha Ahamevakshayah Kalo Dhataham Vishwato Mukaha. So all this is self-explanatory. And then Mrityu Sarvaharaschasu Udbhavascha Bhavishyatam Kirtik Shrirvarcha Narinam Smritir Medha Dhritik Kshama. So I'm the death that takes away everything, and I'm the cause of prosperity of those yet to come. And among the feminine words, I am the fame, wealth, speech, memory, intelligence, fortitude, and equanimity. Here, this actually quite sums up the definition of Bhagavan, which is those 6 characteristics of Bhagavan, right? That is absolute wealth, absolute knowledge, absolute dispassion, overlordship. And there is one more. I think that creates the an absolute virya. So all of this is the part of the definition of Bhagavan. And then Brihat Sama Tatha Samnam Gayatri Chandasamaham Masanam Margashirshoham Rutunam Kusumakaraha. This is also very self-explanatory. And then Dyutam Chalayatamasti Tejas Tejasvinamaham Jayosmi Vyavasayosmi Sattvam Sattvavatamaham. So I am the clarity in thinking. And of those whose nature is predominantly sattva, I am the sattva. I am the game of dice among the things that deceive. Of brilliance, I am the brilliant, I am the brilliance. And Vrishninam Vasudevosmi, Pandavanam Dhananjaya, Muninam Apyaham Vyasaha, Kavinam Ushana Kavihi. Ushana is Shukracharya, and Rishinam, of the Yadavas, I am Vasudeva. It's interesting to know that Krishna and Kunti are actually cousins. Vasudeva is the son of Ugrasena, whose other offspring is Kunti, who was actually given an adoption to Kunti Bhoja. So they're not cousins actually. Kunti is actually almost like his grandmother, isn't it?
Father's sister
sorry,
is
not
aunt.
his his like his paternal aunt, not his grandmother. Yeah, paternal aunt. And among the Pandavas, I'm Dhananjaya, among the seers, I'm Vyasa, and among the sages, Kavi is someone who knows the past, present, and the future. Dando damayatamasmi, nitirasmi jigishatam, maunam chaivasmi guhyanam, jnanam jnanavatamaham. So I'm the discipline of those who enforce discipline. I'm justice of those who want success. And I'm the silence among the secrets. Even that was, that Yudhishthira was the one who cursed women. That is also not known till now. I mean, I didn't know that till now. And of those who have knowledge, I'm that knowledge. Yeah. Anyone else wants to share anything?
Why don't we chant the Gita after the Gita and then start the Manana? So the Gita thing is continuous.
I didn't get you, Suma. What is it?
I said before we start the Manana of Atma Bodha, we could do the chanting of Bhagavad Gita, that first chapter or something. And then we can do Atma Bodha. Are we starting the chanting today of Bhagavad Gita?
Yeah, we'll start from today. Although I'm thinking, because most people I think have gone for their Kriya and things like that. So should we put the chanting off to tomorrow? Or should we make a beginning today?
How many are there now? Only
we
7.
Are just 7 of us.
Then maybe we should wait for everybody.
Should we do from tomorrow?
Come for chanting? How many have agreed
Yeah,
to chanting?
I think quite a few were quite interested. Bela had sent me a message today. She's going to for the long kriya and the center. And I think even Madhuri is not there. So if we are doing 2 chapters every time, I mean every day, then we'll comfortably finish well before Ganesh Chaturthi, before 31st. And then maybe we can spend some more time in case anyone wants to do that repetition mode. We can then do some of the chapters then. Huh?
Yeah.
But what I would recommend is that we do the Atma Bodh for 30 minutes at least. Otherwise, that will take a back seat.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So today we'll just do Atma Bodh. Anyone wants to share anything about the chapter 10? We'll
Vishnu stories, we have to again go and listen to them many more times. Otherwise, I'm not able to remember.
I know. So yesterday we stopped at the 5 sheets, no? This was where we stopped. Vapustushadi bhikkoshaihi yuktam yuktya atmanam atmanamantaram shuddham vivichya tandulam yatha. So through discriminative self-analysis and logical thinking, one should separate the pure self within from the sheets as one separates the rice from the husk, bran, etc. that are covering it. And then, Sada Sarvagato Hyatma Na Sarvatrava Bhasate Buddhya Vevava Bhaseta Swacheshu Pratibimbavat. Sada always, Sarvagataha all pervading, Api although, Atma the self, Na not, Sarvatra everywhere, Avabhasate shines, Buddhau in the intellect, Eva only, Avabhaseta manifests, Swacheshu in the transparent surface, Pratibimbavat just as the reflection. So the Atman does not shine in everything, although he is all pervading. He is manifest only in the inner equipment, the intellect or buddhi, just as a reflection in a clean mirror. The Atman being infinite is by its very nature all pervading. Although it is available in the cognition of all objects, in the pure intellect, buddhi alone, can we come to realize the self, Atma Tattva, in all. Its essential splendor, just as in a clear, polished mirror alone, are we able to see our reflections distinctly. Although, according to the principles of reflection, our faces are reflected everywhere on all objects. Let us again take the example. Let me just go to number 1. According to physics, light falling on the object gets reflected, and these reflected light rays again get reflected at the reflecting surface. And when they fall on our retina, we see the reflection. This process goes on even on a granite rough wall surface, but we don't see our reflection there. It is only in a clean mirror that we see our reflection. So let us again take the example of our own government. It functions from New Delhi, but it sounds odd if we really mean that the government is in New Delhi alone and not in the other parts of India. The government may have its headquarters up in the north, but even in a little home away in the south, the overall hold and grace of the government falls equally. On every inch of the country it has its sway. Its laws are applicable throughout the length and breadth of the land. Yet, to meet the government, one must go to New Delhi. So too, although the Lord, the Supreme Brahman, who is the substratum for all this plurality, is within us, as well as without us, it is only in the subtle intellect, buddhi, purified and steadied, that it is to be clearly seen, fully reflected. The body is gross, the mind is agitated over one thing or another, and hence it is in the subtle intellect that one can learn by practice to be calm and steady. In that serene quietude of a settled and pure mind, the effulgent self is recognized. Just as we can see quite easily and clearly our own image only in a clean mirror held steady. देहेन्द्रियमनो बुद्धिः प्रकृतिभ्यो विलक्षणम् तद्वृत्तिसाक्षिणं विद्यात् Atmanam Rajavat Sada. Dehe, Deha, body. Indriya, senses. Manas, mind. Buddhi, intellect. Prakriti-bhyaha, from all this matter. Prakriti. Vilakshanam, distinct. Tat vritti sakshinam, witness of their functions. Vidyat, know. Atmanam, the self. Rajavat, like a king. Sada, always. One should understand that the Atman is always like the king, distinct from the body, senses, mind, and intellect, all of which constitute the matter Prakriti and is the witness of their functions. The pure intelligence, the all pervading Brahman, is to be understood as distinct from and beyond the physical equipments constituted of the body, mind, and intellect. For it is this supreme illuminator who illumines the subtle workings of the intellect, the grosser thoughts of the mind, and the still grosser physical movements. In spite of all the seemingly interested association, that is illumination, it is ever a mere witness and never a participant. An illuminator is always separate from the objects illumined. The subject of experience cannot be the same as the objects of the same experience. A king is not a participant in the drama and dance in his darbar hall. He is only a witness, and like him, the Atman is a witness of the drama of life going on in this body and in the world outside, the microcosmic and the macrocosmic existence. Subjectively analyzed, self is a witness of the play of matter. The ideas of good and bad, the knowledge of right and wrong, the feeling of sorrow and joy, and the appreciation of beauty and ugliness, our sense of duty and neglect, etc., and the actions of the physical body are all aspects of our inner and outer subjective life. These experiences, constituted of the knowledge which we know and also of those which we do not know, that is, the positive experience of a thing and the nothingness of what we do not know, the bhava and the abhava, are all illumined for us by that one awareness, the pure consciousness. It stands aloof and does not identify itself with what is happening in the entire cosmic order, nor does it identify itself with what is happening within ourselves in the different layers of matter. It is not the sharer of the experience. It is only an observer, like the king in his darbar hall, a non-partisan in all affairs, disinterested in all happenings, and yet all powerful. Rajavat. How many beautiful examples Shankaracharya has given to describe the Atman. Vyapriteshvindriyeshvatma vyapari va vivekinam drishyate bhreshu dhavatsu dhavanniva yatha shashi. Vyapriteshu, while functioning, Indriyeshu, the sense organs, Atma, the self, Vyapari, active, Iva, like, Avivekinam, for non-discriminating people, Drishyate, appears, Abhreshu, the clouds, Dhavatsu, when moving, Dhavan, to be running, Iva, like, Yatha, just as Shashi, the moon. Vyapriteshu indriyeshu Atma vyapari iva avivekinam drishyate Abhreshu davatsu dhavanniva yatha shashi. So the moon appears to be running when the clouds move in the sky. Likewise, to the non-discriminating person, the Atman appears to be active when it is observed through the functions of the sense organs. When the imperishable self sheds its illumination and expresses itself in the life of the perishable individual, it looks as though the self itself is acting. The actions and movements are of the sense organs, indriyas, and not of the self. The life spark in us, which is the sole nourisher of all life. It gives the organs their capacities for such manifestation. The steam in the engine supplies the power for the locomotive to pull the train of carriages. It is neither a favor nor any prejudice against anybody traveling in the attached compartments. The steam has no particular destination to reach. Similarly, the Supreme Atman, when it expresses itself through the body, mind, and intellect, the self seems to act, but actually, the self participates in none of the activities of the sheaths. It has nothing to gain through any such activities. So, whatever thoughts and actions spark up within and fly past a given individual, the self alone is a substratum for them all. And it is in the light of the self that they are recognized and experienced. There would be absolutely no manifestation or existence of life, either in the individual or in the cosmic order, without the omnipotence of this supreme, available, ever so readily to sustain them all. A person who lacks in his powers of discrimination, that is an aviveki, does not perceive the truth playing so evidently beneath the play of manifested life, but mistakes the activity of the non self as that of the self, even though perceptibly it is only an unbiased witness and detached observer. In almost every one of the stanzas, we are given a comparison without which the mighty and glorious existence of the real self cannot be indicated as the immaculate, ever uncontaminated by the frolics of the unreal. Here, the illustration is that of the moon, which seems to the childish folk as moving because of the clouds that pass in front of it. In a train journey, it looks as though the trees and hillocks of the countryside are moving fast, while actually the train indeed is that is moving. Through a moving medium, even a motionless steady object looks as though moving. The objects observed gather to themselves the properties of the medium through which we observe. The illustration employed here has a very deep significance to those who can clearly meditate upon it. The entire import of the illustration can strike us down with a joyful amazement when we visualize the picture clearly. Imagine an observer looking up at the moon through the marching clouds in the sky. The observer is standing maximum 6 feet from the surface of the vast earth, observing the moon that glows some thousands of miles away through clouds that are a couple of miles away from the observer. And yet, the observer cries, "The cloud has covered the moon," or "The moon is running." Similarly, the infinite self, when viewed through the restlessness of the body, mind, and intellect, looks as though the self is agitated and active. If there be the sufficient mental poise and the required scientific observation of the phenomena of life, the intelligent student can easily recognize that all agitations belong, in fact, to the matter layers in us, and the self is never involved in them. The moon seems to be moving because we look at it through a moving medium. We recognize life as dynamic because we observe life only through the vehicles of its expressions. Looking at a living creature through its physical, mental, and intellectual activities, we say life is dynamic, active, ever pulsating. In fact, life as such is not active. The vehicles thrilled by life act, and these actions are superimposed upon the self. And in this confused observation, it seems as though the self is active. When the mind is agitated, the self seems to be agitated. We do not realize that the self has no such agitations, that it is silent and steady, firm and dispassionate, and that these eruptions are only on the surface of the mind. Thus, upon the glorious self are wrongly superimposed the functions of the different layers of matter. To experience the self without the intervention of the matter sheets is to realize its infinitude and full divinity. So it is the between the changeless and the unchanging, ever eternal, and the changing world. The changing world are like the moving clouds, and the changeless, eternal is the Atman. So the intelligent one, the Viveki, is the one who's able to see the unchanging, the changeless entity through the changing world, through in and through the changing world. Nice. Atma chaitanyamashritya dehendriya manodhiyah svakriyartheshu vartante suryalokam yatha janaha. Atma chaitanyam, vitality of consciousness, ashritya, depending upon, dehendriya manodhiyah, body, senses, mind, and intellect, svakriyartheshu, in their respective activities, vartante, engage, surya lokam, light of the sun, yatha, just as, janaha, people. Atma chaitanyam ashritya dehendriya manodhiyah svakriyartheshu vartante suryalokam yatha janaha. Depending upon the energy or vitality of consciousness, Atma Chaitanya, the body, senses, mind, and intellect engage themselves in their respective activities, just as men work depending upon the light of the sun. Just a minute. I think there are some people who've joined for the Gita chanting. Just to let you know, because most of our regular people who come for the Manana are busy with long kriya and the Sunday activities. It was decided unanimously that we'll begin Bhagavad Gita chanting from tomorrow. Hmm? So tomorrow, this time, that is, I don't know what time it is in India now. Uh, it is 8 o'clock, so 10:30 India time, right? For the next few days, till about the 24th or so, we will do it at 10:30 India time. After that, we will shift back to doing it at 8:30 India time. So those of you who've joined for the Bhagavad Gita chanting, this is just to let you know about it. We'll begin from tomorrow. Right now, we are doing Manana on Atma Bodh. You're most welcome to continue. So, depending upon the energy, yeah, that is fine. Every one of the equipments, body, mind, and intellect, functions in its own definite sphere. And each one of it depends entirely upon that power, Atma Chaitanya, which by its mere presence kindles life in matter and makes it look as though sentient. The power of electricity is one, but its fields of operation are different. Without electricity, even if we have all the bulbs and switches in their proper places, we do not get any manifestation. Likewise, without the enlivening Atman, no activity is possible in this world, and all the objects of creation would then be, without its grace, a dead weight of matter, hanging heavily around like stone, inert, dark, and devoid of any symptom of life and hope. It is that which makes up the life in all, at once dynamic, gay, energetic, and beaming with attraction, although in itself it is not affected by the things and happenings of life, which it illumines in its shining presence, that is divine. The illustration here is from the various activities that start with the rising of the sun in the east. Whatever be the thoughts and actions of an individual who faces the day, the sun which illumines the earth is not affected by the happiness or sorrow of those who are here in this world. It simply illumines whatever part of the globe comes before it, its power of illumination. So too, at the touch of the illumining glory of the self, Atma Chaitanya, the outer world of activities is vitalized. The self never gets mixed up with anything which it vitalizes. Whatever be the situation which the sun is illumining, some bleeding war or some boiling tar, the sun neither gets red nor black. The sunlight need never get boiled up with the prevailing sense of hate or heat. This is so beautiful. It's just like how on the movie screen, the theater, all the whole movie is being projected. The theater, the screen itself is untouched. But within that, if not for the screen, the movie cannot be seen. You cannot project anything. So the screen is unaffected, unattached to anything that happens on it. So similarly, just like how the sun illumines everything that happens in the matter, in the mind, body, and intellect, yet it remains unaffected. It stands like the witness. Dehendriya gunan karman Yamale Sachidatmani Adhyasyadya Vivekena Gagane Nilatadivat. Dehendriya Gunan, qualities of the body and senses, Karmani, actions, Amale, pure, Sachidatmani, on the Atman, the absolute existence knowledge, Adhyasyanti, superimpose, Avivekena, by lack of discrimination, Gagane, in the sky, Nilatadivat, blue color, and the like. Fools, because they lack in their powers of discrimination, superimpose on the Atman the absolute existence knowledge, that is Satchit Ananda, all the varied functions of the body and the senses, just as they attribute blue color and the like to the sky. Because they lack in their powers of right discrimination, the qualities of the body, mind, intellect, the limitations of the physical and subtle body are superimposed by the ignorant on the pure self. Thereafter, the deluded mistake this real self to be one possessing all the imperfections of the superimposed equipments. This non-discrimination, aviveka, is like the misconception which makes children believe that the sky is blue when actually it has no color. Not only the blueness and the concavity, but the concavity of the sky, murkiness, misty looks, dusty conditions are all often considered as conditions of the sky. In fact, space appears as having these qualities, but space as such has none of them. An object is not affected by the traits superimposed upon it. And here, when we superimpose certain characteristics of the body and mind on the self-effulgent being, the truth itself is not affected by such misconceived notions and attributes. The blueness perceived is the experience of our limited vision when it looks at the endless summer sky. Ajnananmanasopadhehe कर्तृत्वादीनि चात्मनि कल्प्यन्ते mbugate chandre chalanadi yathambasaha. Ajnanat, through ignorance, manasopadhehe, of the mind which is an upadhi, kartritvadini, agency of action, etc., cha, and atmani, on the self, kalpyante, attribute, ambugate, which is reflected in the water, chandre, in the moon, chalanadi, tremblings, etc., yatha, just as, ambasaha, of the water. Ajnanat manasopadhehe kartritvadini cha atmani kalpyante ambugate chandre chalanadi yatha ambasaha. The tremblings that belong to the waters are attributed through ignorance to the reflected moon dancing on it. Likewise, agency of action, of enjoyment, and of other limitations, which really belong to the mind, are delusively understood as the nature of the self or Atman. This is exactly what I was going on. The Kartritva Bhavana that we have, that I am the doer, is we are falsely superimposing that on the Atman. So the every time we are in the non-doer attitude, non-doership space, we are connecting ourselves to the Supreme Atman. So the ideas, I am the enjoyer, I am the doer, are of the intellect. These different ideas, such as I am this, I am that, etc., arise in the mind only when we are in the midst of the activities of the workaday world and of the dream world. For when we are in deep sleep, we do not have any such ideas. It is only when the mind is available for perception and cognition that we come to know of things cognized. So, as long as we identify ourselves with the mind, so long alone can we claim to have the dual experiences in these planes of existence. But when once we have withdrawn ourselves from the mental plane and are in a state of pure consciousness, samadhi, we realize that all the thoughts and emotions and activities of the intellect, mind, and body are not in the self, nor are they of the self. The delusory reflection of the consciousness in the mental pool, which agitates with the panting egoistic ideas of I am the doer, I am the enjoyer, etc., cease when there are no more any thought eruptions therein. The example here is of an image of the moon reflected in a bucket of water, which seems to shiver when the water surface is disturbed. When the water calms down and becomes steady, we do not see the shattered moon in the bucket of water reassembling to form one whole. Similarly, when one has purified one's mind and has consolidated its strength and has reconstructed it to be firm and steady by narrowing down its various unholy, unhelpful, and selfish thoughts, the glory of the self gets automatically reflected in all its beauty within oneself, unshaken by the dualities around and the consequent agitation. This is so beautiful. This is what the whole essence of the Jnana Yoga is, isn't it? Where once you steady your mind, you're able to perceive the Atman.
In fact, the what you are reading, it that itself is very meditative.
Yeah, it is. How we give this the doership, how the for us to um, reflect upon our doership. This example is so beautiful. Is that the shivering, the trembling waters are falsely attributed to the moon, when actually the moon does not tremble. It is only the shivering waters. It's the agitations in our mind that cause that uh, the impression that I am the doer, I am the enjoyer. Very nice. रागच्छे सुखदुःखादि बुद्धौ सत्यां प्रवर्तते सुषुप्तौ नास्ति तन्नाशे तस्मात् बुद्धेस्तु नात्मनः. Raga, attachment, ichha, desire, sukha, pleasure, dukkhadi, pain, etc. Buddhau, satyam, when mind or intellect functions, pravartate are perceived, sushuptau in deep sleep, na not, asti is, tannashe at the destruction of it, that is mind, tasmat therefore, buddhehe of the mind, tu only, na not, atmanaha of the mind, of the atman, sorry. Attachment, desire, pleasure, pain, etc. are perceived to exist so long as buddhi or mind functions. They are not perceived in deep sleep when the mind ceases to exist. Therefore, they belong to the mind alone and not to the Atman. There is no place for ignorance in the blissful existence of the self, which is omniscient and omnipresent. How can there be darkness before light? And how can the passions that arise in the mind come to stay with the Atman? It is the avidya of the individual, his desire for pleasure, and his attachment to the fruits of his actions that deludes him to the bondage of samsara. A pure mind leads one to greater glory and happiness, and ultimately to liberation through the final experience of the true knowledge, while the same mind drags the individual down to lower births when it groans in ajnana. Therefore, if we deal suitably with the turbulent mind and quieten its righteous activities, the self is revealed in its infinite glory with no blemish of the jivatman, of the jivatvam in him. And remember, attachment, desire, etc., are of the mind and not of the Atman. So long as we are functioning through our mind, we are under the tyranny of attachment, desire, pleasure, pains, etc. But in deep sleep, when temporarily our minds are not effective in ourselves, all these tyrannies are at an end. When I look through a pair of green goggles, everything looks green. When I look at things with my naked eye, there is no green color. Therefore, the greenness is due to the glasses. So too, all these negative tendencies belong to the mind and are perceived only through the mind. They are not of the Atman. Yesterday we had this question as how to take care of our rasa, isn't it? I think this, and I think Rinal mentioned self-contemplation is the way forward. This shloka is so beautiful in giving us a so-called solution to this. So attachment, desire, pleasure, pain are perceived to exist as so long as the buddhi or the mind function. They are not perceived in deep sleep when the mind ceases to exist. Therefore, they belong to the mind alone and not to the Atman. So if we can just meditate and contemplate upon this, that all our ragas and dveshas are there, so long as we are in the waking state or even in the dream state. But in deep sleep, there is no raga and dvesha. So similarly, it is like looking at life through this green goggles. You look at everything seems green. So the moment you disidentify yourself with the mind and intellect and understand that all this is happening only in the mind intellect framework, then automatically that rasa will slowly start getting uh, thinner and thinner. Its hold on us will get lighter, and then we'll ultimately be free from raga and dvesha. Yeah. प्रकाशोऽर्कस्य तो यस्य शैत्यमग्निर्यथोष्णता स्वभावः सच्चिदानन्दः नित्यनिर्मलतात्मनः. Prakashah, luminosity, Arkasya of the sun, Toyasya for water, Shaityam, coolness, Agnehe for fire, Yatha just as, Ushnata, heat, Swabhavaha, nature, Sat, reality, Chit, consciousness, Ananda, bliss, Nitya, eternity, Nirmalata, purity, Atmanaha of the Atman. Just as luminosity is the nature of the sun, coolness of water, and heat of fire, so too the nature of the Atman is eternity, purity, reality, consciousness, and bliss. Whether it is the human personality or the plant specimen or animal entity, no one wants to die or suffer any agony and pain. Instead, there is a positive effort at all times for the acquisition of knowledge and the enjoyment of pleasure and for the self-preservation of the individuality. Nothing can remain away from its essential nature, dharma. There cannot be cool fire or a dark sun. Every object must express its own essential nature. The sun is luminosity itself, which it shows out. The heat of the fire is well known, and no one has come across a cold ball of fire. Similarly, if at all Atman is to be defined in terms of its nature, we can only say that it is that which is eternal, Nitya, ever pure, Nirmala, and existence, knowledge, bliss, Sat Chit Ananda. So this one, I always used to have this thing as why do we uh, why do we seek positivity in life? Why do we seek happiness and all those that are positive in life? When Atma is Brahman is actually both the pairs of opposites. So this shloka explains how, because the nature of Atman is nothing but um, existence, bliss, knowledge. That is why we seek that. That is why we naturally move towards that. That is why we seek joy. We are not, and we are averse to anything which is miserable. Because it is the dharma, it is the dharma of the Atman.
That's why it is said, right? Each one of us is going to reach there, but then it depends on when. But each one of us
Correct.
are going to reach there. Yeah.
Yeah. Atmana Satchidam Shamscha Buddhirvrittirithi Dvayam Samyojya cha Vivekena Janamiti Pravartate. Atmanaha, of the self, Satchidamshaha, the existence knowledge aspect, Cha, and Buddhehi, of the intellect, Vrittihi, the thought wave, Itihi, thus, Dvayam, the two, Samyojya, blending, Cha, and Avivekena, through indiscrimination, Janami, I know, Iti, thus, Pravartate, functions. By the indiscriminate blending of the two, the existence knowledge aspect of the self and the thought wave of the intellect, there arises the notion of I know. The Atman is self effulgent and the mind is inert matter. Without the power of illumination in consciousness, the mind would be inert and powerless to feel, for without this awareness within, we will not be conscious of our own thoughts. At the same time, a marriage between these two contradictory things is impossible, and therefore, any alliance between the two is only at best a delusory superimposition. The experience I know is thus produced only when a feeling or thought stands bathed in the light of consciousness. Each thought is considered as a wave like as a wave like disturbance in the mental stuff. When these waves of thought arise in us, they are illumined by our awareness. When we cry, I know, I understand, I feel, etc., the sun rises and then the waves of the sea are seen and experienced. The sunlight falls on all surfaces equally. Like a silken veil, it lies on every surface. And when the waves rise, the light veil yields, embracing the waves on all sides, illumining it. So too, in our inner bosom, the light of consciousness illumines the height, breadth, and depth of each thought. The mind intellect equipment stands ever exposed to the eternal self and its light of awareness. When, through the sense organs, the stimuli from external world reach the bosom, the mind, with the help of the knowledge acquired by it in the past, produces its responses, which in their turn are expressed in the action. Life is an unbroken series of experiences, and therefore the individual is called upon to respond to it constantly. To know the happenings and to know how to meet them is the contents and purpose of man's intellectual life. Self is knowledge absolute. It is knowledge itself. In it, there is nothing else that is to be known. It is the only one subject without any object to be known. As such, in itself, it has nothing to know. Yet, we are experiencing the intellectual life of constantly knowing. How? This is the subject explained in this stanza. It is the theory in Vedanta that the knowledge of things is gained not in the direct light of consciousness, but it is in the beam of consciousness reflected in the mind. I will explain it with the help of an illustration. Suppose there is a storeroom in your house which is ever in darkness. One day, you realized that the room was extremely well illumined. Why? There was a bucket of water on the veranda where the sunlight got reflected and threw a pool of light on the dark wall of the room. If your little son were to come at that time to play with the bucket of water, the illumination in the dark room will disappear. For when the reflecting medium is disturbed, the reflected light is splashed about and the room is again in the dark until the reflection rehabilitates itself on the wall. So too, the self never illumines the objects directly, but the light of consciousness reflected on our intellect throws out a beam of reflected consciousness which illumines the objects and gives us the experience, I know. That is why even a man of intelligence, when vexed with some worry, cannot think properly or understand easily. His power of understanding or thinking is clouded when the mind is disturbed. Thus, when the mental pool rises in thought waves, the light of the self illumines them. Thoughts dressed in consciousness is the clear experience, I know. Feelings and ideas in our bosom, glittering in consciousness, are our knowledge of things. Anger, knowledge, etc., are all characteristics of the mind, and they are thus attributed to the Atman due to lack of discrimination. The nature of the Atman in reality is Sat Chit Ananda, and this eternal self does not undergo any change even when the individual experiences anger, pain, pleasure, etc. in his mind. I will just read this paragraph again. Huh? So the mind intellect equipment stands ever exposed to the eternal self and its light of awareness. I'll actually read by the indiscriminate blending of the two, the existence knowledge aspect of the self and the thought wave of the intellect, there arises the notion of I know. Tell me where, if any of you wants me to start reading from anywhere, I wanted to actually read from here. When through the sense organs, the stimuli from external world reach the bosom, the mind, with the help of the knowledge acquired by it in the past, produces its responses, which in their turn are expressed in the action. Therefore, life is an unbroken series of experiences, and therefore, the individual is called upon to respond to it constantly. To know the happenings and to know how to meet them is the contents and purpose of man's intellectual life. Whereas self is knowledge absolute, it is knowledge itself. In it, there is nothing else that is to be known. It is the only one subject without any object to be known. As such, in itself, it has nothing to know. Yet, We are experiencing the intellectual life of constantly knowing how. This is the subject explained in the stanza. It is the theory in Vedanta that the knowledge of things is gained not in the direct light of consciousness, but it is in the beam of consciousness reflected in the mind. This is what I was not able to kind of get. Did anybody understand it? So let's see this example that Swamiji is giving. Suppose there is a storeroom in your house which is ever in darkness. One day you realized that the room was extremely dark. One day you realized that the room was extremely well illumined. Why? There was a bucket of water on the veranda where the sunlight got reflected and threw a pool of light on the dark wall of the room. If your little son were to come at that time to play with the bucket of water, the illumination in the dark room will disappear. For when the reflecting medium is disturbed, the reflected light is splashed about, and the room is again in the dark until the reflection rehabilitates itself on the wall. So too, the self never illumines the objects directly, but the light of consciousness reflected on our intellect throws out a beam of reflected consciousness which illumines the objects and gives us the experience I know. So too, the self never illumines the objects directly, but the light of consciousness reflected on our intellect throws out a beam of reflected consciousness which illumines the objects and gives us the experience I know. That is why even a man of intelligence, when vexed with some worry, cannot think properly or understand easily. His power of understanding or thinking is clouded when the mind is disturbed. Just like how that light gets obstructed when the child comes to play with that bucket of water. So it
is it
yeah,
intending that the in between we get the glimpse of that thing? Is it something similar to that? It's just the
yeah,
reflection. It's not actually that. That's why we don't have that condition throughout. It's just the
correct,
reflection we see.
correct. I think that is what is the understanding, the meaning and import here. It is that it is just that reflection of that consciousness on the intellect, on the mind, that gives us this capacity of I know, that is getting reflected upon the objects outside. But it is only when we quieten all of these equipments, as long as there is these agitations, as long as there is this mind going external, we are able to perceive we're able to come to the understanding I know, or I'm happy, I'm sad. All that is only a reflection of the beam of consciousness. That is why in that meditation that we do in advanced course, there is this thing where Gurudev says, I am, I am intelligent, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm, all that. And what remains is I am. The I am is that light of consciousness, the uninterrupted light of consciousness. What we are associating is with the beam of consciousness, that it is only that reflected thing that makes us think I am this, I am that, and all that. I think that is my understanding. I mean, if anybody else can throw some light, that is good. So, anger, knowledge, etc., are all characteristics of the mind, and they are thus attributed to the Atman due to lack of discrimination. The nature of the Atman in reality is Satchit Ananda, and this eternal self does not undergo any change, even when the individual experiences anger, pain, pleasure, etc., in his mind. It is this false superimposition, no? Just like how we attribute the trembling, trembling of the moon to the movement ripples in the water. We attribute the ripples, the trembling of the water to the moon trembling. Similarly, whatever is going on in our mind, the agitations in our mind, the experiences we have in our mind, we are falsely attributing to the Atman, which in effect is actually Satchit Ananda, that is eternal bliss, knowledge. So the whole sadhana is therefore to remove the superimposition. Yeah. We continue this from tomorrow, from verse 26. We'll continue from tomorrow, right? Anybody wants to share anything before we close?
Again, this is grazing cows.
Yeah.
Question. Did the evolution happen because of raga and dvesha? Because we desired something and we averse something. So we knocked off few things physically, mentally, and we desired something better. Is that the reason the anybody evolved, like even the animals or the humans have been evolving? Is it because of the raga dvesha?
I don't know. In fact, again, it is asking, going back to
It
the
is purely
prarabdha.
a scientific question, nothing to do with
Yeah.
this thing. But yeah,
See, if we ask then, how come not everybody has mumukshutvam? How come only some people have? Then all these questions arise, isn't it? How come only some people have this thought of wanting to gain a self-realization? All that again boils down to samskaras and prarabdha and all that. Again, we're going back to the first initial question of how did the first prarabdha come? So understand that in this birth at least we've done some good samskaras in the previous janma, and therefore we are here wanting to gain knowledge. So I don't know whether the evolution is because of ragas and dvesha or it's in spite of it.
What I understand is evolution is in the mind, and raga dvesha in the mind is not a sign of evolution. The thinning of raga and dvesha is a sign of evolution.
no,
Now,
what I'm saying, the physically what evolution has happened,
that's what I was
like the
coming to.
monkey
Yeah.
had shedded its tail because it might be disturbing it or whatever, and that's why it shedded its tail. I mean, that's how I'm saying, like something we didn't want and something we wanted. Could that be the reason?
I don't know about that. It's more like a story than a science that if the monkey didn't want its tail, it lost its tail. I don't see any science in that. Um, the body, as we know, is generated in the mind first, isn't it? And then that soul or that Atma takes that body. So that is how even Narasimha Avatar is like that. The first blueprint of that body was already created in the mind. Such a thing never existed, but a blueprint was created and then the body came. So that is how the body I see it. And how the science of evolution of the body is not I don't think it is just raga dvesha
No, I
related.
think no. I think we I think read it in the previous shlokas where Swamiji had mentioned thought by thought, action by action, we are actually creating a blueprint for our the rest of our life and the following lives, because we are creating this
True.
this hold of vasanas. No, so that
Yeah.
way, yes, that way, whatever goes on in our mind, we are responsible. The outcome of whatever happens right now within us will
Yeah, I
determine what our
understand that.
future will be,
Yeah,
isn't it?
but what she is
So
asking is about evolution of the body, like how the amphibian, from that amphibian it became a terrestrial animal and then slowly it lost
yeah,
its tail.
that I
Not
think
that,
I think if you're going by Vedanta, by going by Vedic wisdom, it is like everything developed, everything was manifested in one go. It was not like one leading to the other. So all beings were manifested impromptu. That is the Yugapat. The Yugapat explanation of how creation happened was the Brahman just had a thought and that's it. Everything manifested. It is not one leading to the other or one. It was not a gradual process. So when you look at that, then this raga dvesha does not really make any.
Right.
It doesn't. It's not important. But
Correct.
for a given individual, for you and me, for instance, what is going on in our mind? What are the thoughts we entertain? What are the actions we're doing? That will certainly determine how our rest of this life is and how our next life is. Our own individual evolution, yes, it of course has an impact, because that will determine what our vasanas are, or how, whether we are adding to our vasanas or we are thinning our vasanas. It all depends on that.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Well, if we
Yeah.
have this theory of having this Jagat at one time, then this Raga Dvesha evolution doesn't apply over here. Yes.
Correct. No, it doesn't make any. Yeah. Nice. These are very beautiful verses. Every verse is so beautiful, but especially with respect to this rasa that we were talking about yesterday, and how to pursue the roadmap for mumukshutvam, that taking care of that rasa is to work on our. Let me just read that shloka once before winding up. Is this the one? Not this. There were 2, 3 shlokas that were very beautiful that we could use for contemplation. This is the one. In deep sleep, raga, rage, cha, sukha, dukkhadi, buddhau satyam pravartate, sushuptau nasti tannashe, tasmad buddhistu natmanaha. So just by watching ourselves, attachment, desire, pleasure, pain are perceived to exist so long as buddhi or mind functions. They are not perceived in deep sleep when the mind ceases to exist. Therefore, they belong to the mind alone and not to the Atman. So just that in deep sleep, we are not really attached to vanilla ice cream or whatever chocolate ice cream, or we are not averse to bitter gourd and things like that. It is only in the waking and probably dream state. So when we contemplate upon this, it would certainly help come down on our rasas. So it's good to memorize this shloka maybe and think about, contemplate on that. So we'll close here today. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Jai Gurudev. So we'll begin Gita chanting from tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have half an hour of Atma Bodha Manana, and then we'll chant chapter 1 and 2. Let me know if any one of you wants to chant, so then we can accordingly go ahead. Yeah? Jai Gurudev.